Hello, and welcome back to the variance analysis. We are back, possibly by popular demand and possibly just because we already committed to a series of 6 episodes. Obviously, I'm kidding, but today we're joined by a really cool client, the VP of Finance and erstwhile CFO, one of my favorite clients, a bona fide SaaS unicorn based in Atlanta and called Rubicon. Rubicon is an awesome business providing smart waste management solutions to clients all over the US. The waste management industry is a $1 trillion industry, and these guys are really taking it by storm. Backed by incredible people such as founding investors from Uber, for some reason Leonardo DiCaprio, but they've been on an incredible journey. Chris has been there since the very early stages and will speak to the challenges, opportunities, and learnings from leading finance in a high-growth unicorn business. As always, my guests will be far better at introducing themselves and their business, so let's hand over to Chris. So Chris, great to see you. Really appreciate you making time for this. I will hand over to you to introduce yourself and give a bit of a summary as to Rubicon.
Right on. Adrian, thank you so much for having me. My name is Chris Spooner. I'm the Senior Vice President of Finance at a company called Rubicon Technologies. We are a digital marketplace in the waste and recycling industry that's powered by an internally built vertical software layer. And what that means is essentially we connect a network of approximately 7,000 independent haulers to our waste generator customers, typically with an orientation towards diverting more of that waste away from the landfill. Because we don't own the assets that intermediate those transactions, we don't own the collections vehicles, we don't own the landfills, we don't own the disposal facilities, we can be agnostic to the end of life solution. And so we use our technology to find different ways where we can monetize commodities that otherwise would have ended up in the waste stream. We can use our analytics to help our customers implement reverse supply chain solutions and build circular economies within their own supply chains, or we can build circular economies within local geographies where we have adequate density. And so there's a lot of different possibilities at play here to reimagine what the waste and recycling infrastructure should look like when you're not encumbered by landfill assets like a lot of the incumbent players are.
Perfect. So that's a really interesting proposition. So effectively, you're helping organizations monetize what would otherwise be waste products, whilst also making a huge play for the environmental aspects of that.
We are, yeah. So approximately 30 to 32% of our revenues are comprised of materials that Rubicon has actually gone in and extracted from the waste stream and monetized on behalf of our customers. So we're turning what was a pure cost line, something that was going to the landfill, companies were being charged money to bury in the ground, into a revenue line, which Rubicon participates in. And because we're incentivized to do that, we've achieved a recycling rate that's approximately 3 to 4 times in excess of the average in the US.
That's awesome. And then because of that, you've been certified as a B Corp, is that right?
We have, yeah, for a number of factors, including our diversity metrics, which we make public, as well as our ESG metrics. We've been a B Corp now since 2013. So we're one of the oldest and now largest B Corps out there.
That's awesome. And so tell me about the diversity metrics. How does that work for being a B Corp?
Yeah, so B Corp looks at a lot of different things, not just kind of the impact that you have within your vertical. They look at kind of corporate governance. They look at diversity within the workplace, diversity within leadership, your willingness to disclose those metrics. And it's something that, ultimately comprises a composite score for B Corp. That's just one factor of them. And so that's something that we've prided ourselves in, particularly coming from a community like Atlanta, promoting diversity within our workforce and within our leadership team.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, I know we were talking offline about some of the awards and recognition that Rubicon has had recently. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the accolades that we were recently very proud of, we were named to Fast Company's most innovative companies list for 2021, right behind Microsoft and Honeywell. That's agnostic to vertical, just innovative companies in general. So we were pretty pleased to be included within that company.
And one of the things that we've been talking to our candidates about a lot is being voted one of the best places to work for the 4th year running. So huge kudos for that as well. That's very helpful for us when we're recruiting for you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think more than anything else, that's what we're proud of. It's an internally led survey, right? It's not someone coming in and assessing the company from the outside. It's what your own employees think about what it's like to work at Rubicon. And so it's something that we've worked hard to establish and maintain.
And that must have been really tough, particularly over the last 15 months while everybody's been remote. And I know that's something you guys have been very successful at. What's your secret for managing people remotely and keeping them that engaged and that motivated?
Yeah, for me personally, I think with my team, it just comes down to making sure that you carve out the time to check in with folks on a personal level. I think we're all kind of bouncing between Zoom calls and all that shit. So it's really easy to just kind of keep the meeting running up until the 30-minute clock, and then you jump straight onto another call. So I think being thoughtful about how you parse out your day, putting in blocks, not only for your own mental health, but just putting in blocks and reminders like, hey, give Chris a call. Hey, give Matt a call. Just check in with folks and see how they're doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the things we talked about internally is you lose the informal interaction when you're all remote. You have lots of interaction, but it's very contrived, it's very structured, and you lose the water cooler moments or the overheard conversations about someone's well-being or whatever that you can add value to.
Yeah.
And so
from my perspective, I think we're going to have to come to some sort of hybrid situation down the road. I think there's a lot of things that people have come to like, myself included, about working remotely, and we want to preserve what we can there. Yeah. But missing out on those opportunities for collaboration, particularly between departments, where a lot of that creativity comes from. Yeah. And then I think my concern, something that's not going to show up in a remote setting for a couple years down the road, is really kind of fostering talent for high performing younger people, kind of the ability to spend time with them, and foster their growth is something that has always been very rewarding for me, but something that does take time and I think in-person time. And so, you could turn around 2 to 3 years from now and realize that you've kind of missed out on an opportunity for growth within your team if you don't spend that time.
Absolutely. So tell us about your job. So SVP Finance, very high level position within the organization in what is a relatively small finance leadership infrastructure, I think. So tell us about your job.
So it's generalist finance role at this point. I came up through strategy and FP&A, but at this point I lead the finance team here at Rubicon. It's about 110 people in total. So it covers the accountancy, the treasury function. We actually keep data management and data science within finance. And we're working to integrate that with our FP&A function just to create some synergies there. And we can talk about that later. That's kind of where I view FP&A as a practice going in the future. But then we also have a very robust AR and AP operations team, as well as corporate development, mergers and acquisitions rolls up into finance here at Rubicon as well.
Okay, wow. So a broad sphere of influence. And we were talking about this offline earlier. There isn't a CFO above you. So you're assuming a lot of what would be CFO duties.
Yeah, that's right. We've been without a CFO now for about 2 years. So I'm kind of settled into this role at this point.
Yeah, fantastic. But it sounds hugely challenging, and I'm sure it's very rewarding. Tell us about some of the challenges that you face in your role.
Well, I have an excellent team, many of whom you have helped us bring to Rubicon. So thank you very much for that. So yes, challenging, but I've got incredible support to move things forward.
For people looking in who wonder what it's like, what the life of a finance leader in a unicorn business is like, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so I guess I'd answer that question by contrasting that with my impression of what a finance leader is like at a more mature business. And I think the central distinction that I've seen is kind of a risk appetite or an uncertainty appetite, and being able to triangulate and articulate your degree of confidence in decision making. We're moving fast, and I think, particularly if you wind the clock back to an earlier Rubicon and an earlier stage startup, when you're burning money, time is always not on your side, right? And so you've got to make decisions quickly. What's important is that you make a decision, you move forward, you learn from that decision, and you iterate upon that. And so what I've always impressed upon my team is the need to prioritize speed, even at the obvious expense of precision. And so just being really clear about, am I 80% confident in this decision? Am I 60% confident in this decision? Am I 40? but I'm still willing to make a decision, and I can articulate the risks associated with that decision along the way. So I think it just, naturally within finance, we're kind of perfectionists, or we're very detail-oriented people. And so that's kind of been a gradual learning, or rather unlearning experience, I would say, coming here to Rubicon, and trying to prioritize speed over precision.
Okay. And that's interesting from a finance perspective, because people outside of finance will be looking to you for precision. So there's presumably a level of education that you've then got to pass on to the stakeholders outside of finance as to the element of precision versus speed that you can deliver.
Sure, and I think that's where you got to pair that with the ability to accurately quantify and articulate the risks in any decision-making process, so that the business is at least making an informed decision. And I think there's also, you learn along the way ways where you can move forward while also preserving your or I guess protecting your downside. And so you kind of employ this hedging strategy, if you will, of being willing to take bigger bets, being willing to move a little bit faster, but all the while keeping an eye on downside risks as well.
I'm just going to pause for a second, because one or other of us has got a dodgy internet connection at the moment. I'm not sure if it's you.
Oh,
so tell us about the journey that you had from starting your career to get to where you've got to.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, I guess I'll start at the very beginning. I was a finance major in college. No particular reason why. My dad was in finance, so I figured I'd follow the family line there, I guess. And someone that was kind of a mentor for me through college ended up going into investment banking once they graduated. And so, I thought that was kind of the path. It's kind of a pure finance role, a way for me to learn very quickly, kind of cut my teeth. But that was in 2009. So kind of the doldrums of the financial crisis, very difficult to find a role. And, I hadn't focused on my academics the way I should. I hadn't done an internship. And so it was all the more difficult for me. I ended up finding an unpaid internship in Atlanta, and was there for close to a year. So I was kind of grinding through this unpaid internship under the premise, the hopes that it would turn into a paid role down the road. Frankly, not something I advise anyone to do. That was an early learning that I think I've benefited from over the long term. But if I turn this into a little bit of a soapbox, I'd encourage folks at that stage to really think about their worth, and you don't need to take on these unpaid internships sort of thing in this day and age. But that was my path. I was at a small boutique investment banking shop in Atlanta, and it ended up not working out there. So I was able to find a role about a year on with a larger, still boutique investment banking shop in Atlanta, but found a full-time role as an analyst. And was there for 2 years, did a lot of generalist assignments. We weren't focused on any particular vertical, any particular deal structure. We did a variety of recapitalizations, mostly sell-side M&A, some buy-side, but across a variety of industries. One of the last deals that I worked on there was what at the time, kind of the operant word, was clean tech. And so that's where I kind of got interested in, hey, this sort of intersection of sustainability and finance. And it was really around that time that I started to get burnt out with investment banking. I looked to the folks in the office, kind of the cool managing directors, if you will, the guys that you want to be like when you're a young analyst in that industry. And I just saw, kind of the reality of what that life could be like. No knock on it. I realized that it wasn't for me. Seeing what their life was like outside of work. And so at that point, I decided to take a different direction. Looked for corporate strategy roles, focus on M&A in the Atlanta area, and was lucky to come across a company called Novellus. Novellus, if you've heard of this, it's the world's largest aluminum recycler. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what they were doing at the time was enhancing their portfolio, stepping up from from what had been more commodified aluminum to more value-added recycled aluminum content, branded recycled aluminum content, and more technical technical products in specialty materials and in automotive. And so it was a time of high growth for this company. It was actually a really exciting time. Joined a large corporate strategy team, and it seemed like we had a blank check really from the corporate parent, the private equity investor, to invest in new growth, new asset development. And so a lot of global travel, and you really learned a lot. I think there was, from a deal perspective in investment banking, I had always been thinking about, working up to the close of the transaction. And so this kind of broadened my perspective to say, here's what it's like, once you're handed the keys to actually run that business, run that asset, and now you got to make good on the business plan that was put forward. So that was pretty eye-opening. I had some really great mentors and business partners there, and ended up, being there for a little over 2 years in various strategy roles. And then around that time, there were a couple friends of mine that I'd stayed in touch with, that I'd swam with at the University of Georgia, who had jumped ship from the consulting firms that they were at to join a new startup called Rubicon. And one of them approached me and said, "Hey, we don't have a complete finance function here at this time. We're pursuing our first institutional round. We need someone to come in, kind of build an investor deck, build a long-term financial model, build a business case that's going to help us raise money." And so, Novellus being a larger, more mature organization, was a little slower moving, kind of a 9 to 5 sort of thing. I had the time on the side to consult with Rubicon originally, and did that for about 6 months until we had completed our financing round, and was able to come on full time at that point. One of the things that the capital, the use of proceeds was focused on was kind of building out these administrative functions, like a legal team, like an HR team, like a finance team for the first time. And I was excited to join that and become a part of that. I think just expanding on that, one of the things that really attracted me to Rubicon was just this idea of being at a startup and being able to kind of chart your own course, choose your own destiny. Being able, again, to kind of triangulate for yourself what's the right speed to move at. There's, at a larger organization, not saying that this is a bad thing, but there's a higher degree of inertia around any sort of decision-making process, any sort of change that's going to occur in the organization. And I just had a greater appetite for speed, I guess. And so looking at this company that had some really ambitious goals, a track record of high growth, that was alluring to me. And then the opportunity to kind of come in on the ground floor and build up a team from scratch was something that I knew I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to do elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a risk versus reward thing, isn't it? It's obviously higher risk moving into a startup. There's no path most trodden, but the rewards can be huge.
Definitely. And even took a step back from a title and a comp standpoint, just because that's what was on offer at the time. And just based on kind of trusting in the business model and really thinking about this as I'm making an investment in Rubicon, it still made a lot of sense to me.
And then talking of investment in Rubicon, there are some really interesting investors in Rubicon, aren't there? Some really sort of high profile people.
There are, yes. I'd be remiss if I didn't lead off with Leonardo DiCaprio.
If you didn't, I would have. So
our CEO always brings that up, and he was like, "Look, when I told my mom I put the world's biggest movie star's face on a garbage truck, she really knew I'd made it." But no, we've got an incredible cap table, even behind some of the big names. Some folks like Promacap, which is a Mexican infrastructure investor. They've been incredible patient supporters of the business. The Sovereign Wealth Fund of New Zealand, also very similar, strategic patient investor that really believes in the sustainability mission of the business. And it's, I think it's really important to be thoughtful at the early stage of a startup in terms of who you want to bring into the cap table, especially right now when there's so much money sitting on the sidelines. Slowing down a little bit, maybe giving a little on valuation, just to make sure that you're bringing the right partners into the business who can not just bring capital, but help you grow as well.
So it's interesting that you allude to money sat on the sideline at the moment. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think there's so much capital sitting out there, whether that's with venture firms or whether that's with more traditional private equity shops that are starting to look, at earlier stage companies, and think more from a venture perspective.
Yeah.
Strategics, even large conglomerates and corporations in Atlanta, are building out more robust venture capital functions. And then, I think there's from Rubicon's perspective, there's just an increasing appetite to invest in ESG. And, I think previously, if you wound the clock back 5 years ago, 6 years ago to when I joined Rubicon, you had to find folks with a similar worldview who were willing to take a long-term bet on sustainability. It wasn't a clear-cut business case to be made. And so now it is, and what we see is, even more traditional institutional investors are starting to include that as part of their investment thesis. Even for companies that don't have a sustainability orientation in their commercial model, just when they're diligencing traditional investments, they're looking at the sustainability profile of the business. So there's a lot of capital being earmarked towards sustainability, and it's something that has been really exciting to see evolve over the last few years.
Yeah, very cool. And your initial role in Rubicon was what?
I was a senior finance associate. So it was a pretty generalist position. At the time, we had in-house AR and AP. We had a brand new CFO, but we didn't really have an FP&A function, didn't really have the accounting function. And so the mandate from the start was kind of building what does our financial reporting look like, even down to the nitty-gritty level of what does the general ledger structure look like, all the way up to what is our investor financials, how should those be framed up. Okay. Building out a budget and a reporting cadence against the budget, reviewing with the business leaders, as well as, of course, the building out the long-term financial model, long-term strategic plan.
Sounds awesome. And so the business must have changed a lot over the time that you've been there.
It has changed quite a bit, yes. Yes, at this point, we're about 30 times larger than when I joined the business.
30 times, did you say?
30 times larger, yeah.
Wow.
So, with that kind of growth, there's going to be a lot of change. And I think there's just been different seasons to the business as well. Different things that the market has deemed important at the time. Rubicon really started as an enterprise-focused play, and we have gradually made deeper inroads into the small business segment of the market, which sounds like just a commercial strategy thing, but it really is fundamentally different in terms of what our product looks like and what the product market fit is. So that's been a long journey for the business. And then I think where we're at today as well, we spent the time internally to develop technology that can manage all of these transactions in our digital marketplace. And what we found is that there's actually appetite for that software as kind of a vertical software in the waste and recycling category out there. Mm-hmm. And so one of the more faster growing, exciting aspects of the business has been selling that software to municipalities and to commercial haulers to better optimize their own operations. So it's our CTO always frames it up as we eat our own dog food, but it's the same technology that we use to run our business day to day that we're out there they're selling in the market.
Very cool. And as a finance person in that sort of business, or if I'll rephrase that, so if you wanted to be a finance person, a successful finance person in a business like Rubicon, what are the core skills and criteria that are absolutely essential?
Yeah. So I won't spend too much time on this, not to be redundant, but I do think at a company like this with a faster growth trajectory, with a company that's operating in a massive TAM, so much white space, there's going to be quick course corrections in strategy that you just have to get comfortable with. You're going to have to make decisions quicker than you're comfortable with, and so working on that internal psychology, to remain level-headed. Even amidst that is I think first and foremost important, because that's going to underwrite any other abilities that you bring to the table. I think the other thing that's important to bring to the table is more commercial friendliness, if you will. being a partner with the commercial team to make sure that, first and foremost, you are helping to facilitate growth. Doing that in an environment that, maintains appropriate controls, that, can be quantified, that can, the business can operationalize, but making sure first and foremost that you're prioritizing growth above all else is just kind of a different orientation for a finance leader, I think, at a startup.
Very good. Now, one of the things we've placed a few people with you, as you very kindly alluded to earlier on, and they've all been quite different. I think there hasn't been like a theme in terms of the culture or the background or the types of people that you recruit. So how do you, if you think back to the first criteria you set, how do you test for that at interview?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the things that I like to ask is just tell me the time that you made a decision that you were uncomfortable with. And what I really like to focus on is, what was going on internally, not necessarily what happened with that decision. It could have been a good or a bad decision for all I care. But, once you got past that, how did you internalize that? How quickly did you learn from that? And how did you adapt your behavior in the wake of that decision? So trying to, various tests to kind of understand, what is the learning process like for an individual, and how good are they at maintaining a homeostasis personally in an environment of continual change.
And you've, as it sounds, you've created a bit of a safe to fail environment by giving people the leeway to take those risks, provided they're calculated risks.
Yeah, absolutely, has to be. And I think, to be fair, I've also been very grateful to have that benefit as well, being in an environment where it's okay to make mistakes like that.
Yeah.
On the second point, something that I have absolutely everyone that interviews in the finance team at Rubicon answer is I ask them to pitch to me the business that they just came from. Okay. Act as if they're a sales rep out on a sales call and pitch to me the product or the service that your prior company or current company sells. And I think that's really important because in finance, it can be easy to just kind of get siloed into like finance as a function, right? And forget that first and foremost, you need to be a partner to the business. And so really understanding like, what is the product? How do I position? How is it positioned in the market? What is the value that we're creating for the customer? That's important for everyone in the organization to know. I think in my experience, finance in particular, can have a tendency to forget that. And so really prodding people to make sure that they've thought about that is important to me.
Yeah, that's cool. Not many of the finance guys that we talk to get asked that question, and actually must be a problem in my interview debrief because none of them have told me that you've asked me that question, that you didn't ask that question either.
Steve knocked that one out of the park.
So did you always want to end up in this kind of business? Was it in the back of your mind that you wanted to be in a high growth tech driven business?
I don't think so. No. Prior to working at Rubicon, I didn't, I hadn't done any real technology deals in my investment banking career. I hadn't spent a lot of time thinking about tech from a business strategy standpoint. Not the biggest innovator from a like technology adoption standpoint on a personal level. So no, that wasn't really in my mind. Actually for me, it was more about the mission to end waste for Rubicon. I've always been, very passionate about the environment. I grew up, being taught that by my parents. All of our family vacations were out to national parks, spending time out in nature. And so that's just always been something very personally important to me. And so certainly that, accelerated during my time at Novellus and seeing the potential to integrate this as part of my career. And then just really seeing, what an impact that Rubicon's business was able to bring to bear was what brought me in. And it's what keeps me motivated during difficult times here as well.
Yeah, it's nice to feel part of a mission that you really believe in. And we see that more and more in the candidates we work with. They want to believe in the business that they're working for. And that didn't used to be a thing. 20 years ago when I started in recruitment, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think more and more it is now. And also people want to believe in the values of the businesses they're purchasing from or that their customers are. And that's been a real change in recent years, I think.
Yeah, we think so and hope so. I think one of the things that we're piloting out is kind of a Rubicon certification around waste, if you will, and seeing if we can sell that as a premium to our customers. You know, doing the work, of course, to substantiate that they're adopting best practices and doing all that they can do to divert waste from the landfill, but giving them that certification as a good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, to demonstrate to their customers that they're doing right by the environment.
Very good. So I'm going to turn it back to people just for a moment. If you were to give advice to somebody coming out of college now who wanted to become, you know, a finance exec in a business like Rubicon, where would you start? What advice would you give them?
Yeah, you know, I think I would still recommend initiating your career in investment banking. I think the ability to learn very quickly and also clarify for yourself amidst the heightened pressures within that industry what's really important to you is a great experience. You know, even though I looked back on that and knew I wanted to move in a different direction, I'm very grateful for having started there because, you know, I learned the fundamentals of accounting and finance very well in a high pressure situation. And I learned how to communicate effectively at an executive level from an early position, right? I can't think of many other roles where, you know, you're 22, 23, and you're sitting in a corporate boardroom with a CEO and a CFO and presenting in front of them. And so that's a scary position to be in, but I think that's how you learn really quickly.
Okay. Anything else we need to talk about with regards to Rubicon and finance within Rubicon or the finance employer brand within Rubicon?
No, I don't think so. Nothing else is coming to mind.
Great, Chris, it's been really good to talk to you. I really appreciate it. I think there's some good messaging there for people earlier on in their career and, you know, learning from some of the lessons. I think Rubicon is a really exciting business as well. And it's great to work with you guys. So look forward to the next mandate. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Something does come to mind that's not generally finance related, but just a piece of advice that I've had that I've learned from being at a startup that I don't think I would have learned being at a more mature or public company is, you know, I think everything's negotiable. And you probably know this better than anyone, Adrian, but you know, being willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, advocate for yourself. When of course, when you've done your homework, when you're putting out quality work, you know, if you hear things like, well, you know, you're in band X and we can't move you up to that position, or, you know, we can't move you up more than X% from a comp basis year over year. All of those things are negotiable. So I think just keep that in mind, kind of know the value that you're bringing to the table and be willing to go to bat for yourself. Because I think, you know, as long as you're not annoying about it, I think you know, your bosses will respect that as well.
I think that's a great point. And we, as you say, we see that quite a lot. And the biggest indicator of that is when someone resigns and gets counter-offered. And, you know, they've asked for the value they feel that they should get. They've been told it's not possible at all. Then they go and find another job, go back and resign, and suddenly it is possible.
Totally.
So you know that it was possible all the time. It just they didn't negotiate well enough, or they just didn't get given it until there was that pressure there.
Totally.
But that's a really solid point. I appreciate that, Chris. It's been great to talk to you. I really enjoyed it. And I appreciate you making the time.
Yeah, thank you. You as well, Adrian.
All right, cheers.